Right now, in this very moment, something subtle yet powerful is happening beneath the surface of your awareness. You may think you are simply listening, reading, or passing time, but the truth is far deeper. Standing at the intersection between who you have been and who you are about to become. Most people believe change arrives with a date on the calendar, but real transformation begins the instant consciousness wakes up to itself. The moment you become aware that you are aware, you step outside the automatic patterns that have been running your life. For years, many people have lived on mental autopilot, repeating the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, and making the same choices day after day. The body memorizes emotional states and the mind memorizes stories. Together, they create an identity that feels familiar, predictable, and safe even when it is limiting. Awakening begins when you notice the cycle without judging it. Observation alone starts to loosen the grip of the past. When you pause and recognize that your thoughts are not facts and your emotions are not commands, a new space opens within you. That space is the present moment. Present moment is where all change originates, not in regret about yesterday and not in anxiety about tomorrow. The present moment is the only place where energy can be redirected. Most people unknowingly give their energy to memories and expectations, reliving old experiences or rehearsing imagined futures that never arrive. When your attention is fragmented, your power is scattered. But when you gather your awareness into the now, your nervous system begins to settle and clarity starts to emerge. Awakening is not about forcing positivity or denying reality. It is about seeing reality clearly without distortion. When you are truly present, you notice how often the mind tries to pull you backward or push you forward. You see how emotional reactions rise before conscious choice has a chance to intervene. This awareness is not meant to criticize yourself. It is meant to empower you. You cannot change what you are not aware of, but once you see it, you are no longer trapped by it. As you become more present, you may notice moments of discomfort. The familiar identity resists change because it thrives on predictability. The ego prefers what is known, even if what is known no longer serves growth. This discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong, it is evidence that you are no longer asleep. Growth often begins with uncertainty, because the old self is dissolving while the new self has not yet fully formed. Staying present during this phase is an act of courage. When awareness deepens, the present moment stops feeling ordinary. It becomes alive with possibility. You begin to sense that every thought you think and every emotion you feel carries information. You start to understand that consciousness is not passive, it is creative. What you consistently place your attention on begins to shape your internal chemistry, your perception, and eventually your experiences. This is why awakening matters now more than ever. Future is responding not to wishes, but to states of being. In the present moment, you are no longer reacting to life, you are engaging with it. Reaction is rooted in the past. Presence is rooted in choice. Each time you notice a habitual thought and choose not to follow it, you reclaim a piece of your energy. Each time you feel an automatic emotional response and breathe instead of acting, you create space for a new pattern to emerge. Small moments of awareness accumulate, and over time they redefine who you are. As awareness grows, so does responsibility. Not responsibility as pressure, but responsibility as ownership. You begin to realize that waiting for circumstances to change before you change keeps you locked in the same loop. Awakening flips that equation. You understand that internal shifts precede external results. The present moment becomes a training ground where you rehearse new ways of thinking, feeling, and perceiving before they appear in the physical world. This level of awareness brings a quiet confidence. You no longer feel rushed by time because you are no longer trying to escape the now. You recognize that each moment of presence is a vote for the person you are becoming. The more often you return to awareness, the more natural it becomes. Presence stops being something you practice and starts becoming who you are, shaping how you speak, how you listen, and how you interpret the world around you, influencing the decisions you make when no one is watching, subtly guiding your attention toward experiences that match the state of consciousness you are learning to embody. Most people do not realize that their present life is being driven by a version of themselves that was formed years ago. That version was shaped by past experiences, emotional reactions, habits, and repeated thoughts that slowly became automatic. Over time, the mind learned what to expect and the body learned how to feel until those patterns felt like identity. Past self is not just a memory, it is a program that quietly dictates choices, behaviors, and perceptions unless it is consciously interrupted. Breaking free begins with understanding that familiarity is not truth. Just because a thought feels natural does not mean it is accurate. Just because an emotional reaction feels justified does not mean it is necessary. The past self thrives on repetition. It survives by convincing you that tomorrow must resemble yesterday. It speaks through inner dialogue that says change is risky, growth is uncomfortable, and staying the same is safer. Yet that voice is not wisdom, it is conditioning. The body plays a powerful role in keeping the past alive. Emotional influences leave chemical traces, and when those emotions are repeated, the body becomes addicted to them. Stress, guilt, anger, or sadness can become familiar states that feel oddly normal. When the mind tries to change, the body resists, pulling attention back to what it knows. This is why personal change often feels difficult at first. You are not just changing thoughts, you are asking the body to release emotional memories it has stored as survival mechanisms. Awareness is the first act of liberation. When you notice how often you react the same way to the same situations, you begin to see the invisible chains. Reaction is the language of the past self. It happens before conscious choice. It is fast, emotional, often followed by justification. When you pause instead of reacting, you disrupt the cycle. That pause may feel uncomfortable, even unsettling, because the old identity no longer has full control. Letting go of the past self does not mean rejecting your history. It means no longer allowing it to define your future. Experiences happened, lessons were learned, and emotions were felt, but they do not need to be relived indefinitely. The mind often confuses remembering with reliving. Each time an old story is repeated with emotion, the brain and body experience it as if it is happening now. Breaking free requires telling the body that the event is over, even if the memory remains. Choice is the bridge between you were and who you are becoming. Each conscious choice weakens the grip of the old self. When you choose a new response instead of a habitual one, you signal to the brain that a new pattern is forming. At first, choices feel unnatural because they are unfamiliar. The past self feels comfortable because it has been rehearsed thousands of times. The future self feels uncertain because it has not yet been embodied. Often a moment when mind tries to negotiate with change. It offers excuses, delays, and rationalizations. It says you will start later when conditions improve, when you feel more ready. This is not resistance to growth, it is loyalty to identity. The past self wants continuity, wants to remain relevant. Recognizing this strategy removes its power. You stop arguing with the mind and start observing it. As you repeatedly choose differently, something subtle shifts. Emotional charge behind old reactions begins to weaken. Situations that once triggered strong responses start to lose intensity. This is not suppression, it is integration. The nervous system learns that it is safe to respond in new ways. Over time, the body no longer demands the familiar emotional chemicals, and the mind becomes more open to possibility. Breaking free also requires forgiveness, especially toward yourself. Many people remain stuck because they judge who they have been. It keeps attention anchored to the past. Compassion loosens it. When you understand the previous choices were made from a level of awareness you had at the time, you stop carrying unnecessary emotional weight. Forgiveness is not forgetting, releasing the need to keep proving the past. As the old identity dissolves, there may be moments of emptiness. The familiar self is no longer in charge, and the new self has not fully taken form. This space can feel uncertain. It is also rich with potential. It is here that intention becomes powerful. Instead of asking who you have been, you begin asking who you are choosing to be. The brain starts forming new connections, and the body starts responding to new emotional signals. Freedom from the past self is not a single decision. It is a daily practice of awareness, choice, and patience. Each time you notice an old pattern and gently redirect, you are shaping a new identity. Over time, effort decreases and the new way of being feels more natural. The past loses its emotional grip, and the future stops feeling distant. You begin to experience yourself not as a product of what happened, but as a participant in what is unfolding. Begin to recognize that the moment you stop rehearsing who you were, you create space for who you are becoming to step forward, and you begin to, the mind is a magnificent instrument, but like any powerful tool, be trained or it will run on default settings. Most people assume their thoughts simply happen to them, as if the mind has a will of its own. In reality, the mind follows patterns that have been reinforced through repetition. Whatever you consistently think about becomes familiar, and whatever becomes familiar begins to feel real, even when it is only a mental construction. Training the mind starts with recognizing that thoughts are not random. Their conditioned response is shaped by attention. Attention is the currency of consciousness. Where you place your attention determines what grows in your inner world. If your attention is constantly pulled toward problems, worries, or limitations, mind becomes skilled at detecting threats and reinforcing scarcity. Over time, it begins to scan reality for evidence that confirms those expectations. This is not because the world is limited, The mind has been conditioned to filter reality through a narrow lens. Training the mind means deliberately choosing what you focus on, even when the environment encourages distraction. At first, directing attention feels challenging because the mind is used to wandering. It jumps between past memories and future projections, rarely settling in the present. When you attempt to focus on possibility, purpose, or growth, the mind may resist, pull you back to familiar concerns, replay old conversations, or imagine worst-case scenarios. This resistance is not failure, it is feedback. It reveals how deeply ingrained certain mental habits have become. Repetition is how the brain learns. Every time you return your attention to a chosen idea, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with it. This is how possibility becomes believable. At first, a new vision may feel artificial or unrealistic. The mind compares it to past experiences and finds no matching evidence. But the brain does not require proof to build connections. It requires repetition. With consistent focus, what once felt imagined begins to feel familiar. Familiarity is what the mind accepts as real. Mental rehearsal is a powerful aspect of training. When you consciously imagine new outcomes, new behaviors, and new emotional responses, the brain begins to activate as if those experiences are already happening. The body responds to imagined experiences with real chemical signals. This is why repeated visualization can change emotional states and influence behavior. You are not pretending, you are preparing. You are teaching the nervous system what a different future feels like before it arrives. Training the mind also involves interrupting negative loops without fighting them. Suppression strengthens resistance. Awareness weakens it. When a limiting thought appears, noticing it without emotional charge reduces its influence. You begin to see it as a habit, not a truth. Each time you choose not to follow that thought, you create space for a new one. Over time, the mind learns that it does not need to default to old narratives. Language plays a subtle role in shaping perception. The words you use internally influence how experiences are interpreted. When inner dialogue is dominated by doubt or criticism, the mind stays oriented toward defense. When language shifts toward curiosity and possibility, perception expands. Training the mind means becoming conscious of inner speech and gently refining it. This is not about forcing optimism. It is about aligning language with intention. Consistency matters more than intensity. Brief moments of focused awareness practiced regularly have a greater impact than occasional bursts of motivation. Each day you choose to place your attention on growth, you reinforce a new pattern. Over time, mind becomes more disciplined, less reactive, and more open. What once required effort begins to feel natural. This is how mental training becomes embodied wisdom rather than temporary inspiration. As the mind becomes trained to see possibility, perception of reality changes. You begin to notice opportunities that were previously invisible. Situations that once felt limiting start to appear flexible. This is not because circumstances magically change, but because interpretation does. When perception changes, response changes, and when response changes, outcomes follow. The trained mind no longer waits for external permission to believe in a different future. This process requires patience. Neural change does not happen overnight. The mind may revert to old habits under stress or fatigue. These moments are not setbacks, they are reminders to return to awareness. Each return strengthens the skill. Over time, the gap between stimulus and response widens. Choice becomes available where reaction once dominated. Training the mind to see possibility is ultimately an act of self-leadership. You are no longer a passive observer of your thoughts. You become an active participant in shaping them. Attention's more intentional, imagination more disciplined, and inner dialogue more aligned. The mind begins to serve a greater vision rather than recycle old limitations. And you start to experience moments where clarity arises without effort, insight appears without strain, and the future feels less like something you fear and more like something you are quietly rehearsing within your own consciousness, becoming familiar with the idea that what you consistently think about is not just shaping your perception, but preparing the brain and body to recognize and step into experiences that match the patterns you have been training it to see. Emotions are often misunderstood as reactions to the outside world, but in truth, they are signals generated from within. They are the body's interpretation of the mind's activity, chemical messengers that inform you about how you are perceiving reality. When an emotion rises, it feels immediate and convincing, as if it were caused by circumstances, people, or events. Yet beneath every emotional state is a thought, an interpretation, or a belief that set it in motion long before the body responded. People live emotionally by default. They wake up already feeling rushed, stressed, or tired, not because something has happened, but because the body remembers yesterday. Emotional memory becomes a baseline. Over time, certain emotional states become familiar. Familiarity turns into identity. You begin to say things like, "This is just how I am," without realizing that you are describing a conditioned emotional pattern rather than an unchangeable trait. The body is designed to respond quickly to emotion. It is not designed to distinguish between real experiences and imagined ones. When you recall a past event with strong emotion, the body reacts as if it is happening again. Heart rate changes, muscles tense, and chemistry shifts. This is why holding on to elevated emotions matters so deeply. The body does not wait for the future to arrive, it responds to what the mind is rehearsing now. Elevated emotional states are not superficial feelings or forced positivity. They are coherent internal environments that signal safety, possibility, and openness to the nervous system. Emotions such as gratitude, appreciation, inspiration, and clarity bring the body into balance. In these states, the brain functions more efficiently, perception widens, and creativity increases. These emotions are not rewards given after life improves. They are signals that invite improvement. Many people believe they must wait for something good to happen before they feel better. This belief keeps them emotionally dependent on circumstances. When you decide to generate an elevated emotion internally, you reverse that dependency. You teach the body that it is possible to feel fulfilled without external confirmation. This is not denial of reality, it is mastery over internal state. At first, generating elevated emotions may feel unnatural. The body may resist because it is accustomed to certain chemical patterns. Stress hormones, for example, can become addictive because they provide a sense of control or urgency. When you shift away from them, the body may signal discomfort, restlessness, or doubt. This is not a sign to stop. It is evidence that a new emotional baseline is being established. Sustaining elevated emotions requires presence. You cannot feel gratitude while mentally rehearsing problems. You cannot feel inspiration while reliving disappointment. Emotional elevation asks for attention in the now. When attention drifts, emotion follows. Why moment awareness is essential. Each time you notice your emotional state slipping and gently redirect it, you strengthen emotional self-regulation. Elevated emotions also change how you interpret challenges. Difficult situations no longer feel like threats, they feel like information. Instead of asking why something is happening to you, you begin asking what it is teaching you. This shift reduces emotional reactivity and increases resilience. The same circumstances that once triggered frustration can now evoke curiosity or determination, not because the situation changed, but because the emotional lens through which you view it did. The heart plays a powerful role in emotional coherence. When emotion and intention align, the heart sends ordered signals to the brain. This communication influences decision making, perception, and even immune function. Living in elevated emotional states is not just psychological, it is physiological. The body becomes more efficient, energy increases, and recovery improves. You begin to feel less drained by life and more engaged with it. Practicing elevated emotions daily creates emotional muscle memory. Just as repetition trains the brain, repetition trains the heart and body. Over time, it becomes easier to access these states, even in challenging environments. They stop feeling like practices and start feeling like home. This does not mean negative emotions disappear. They no longer dominate. They pass through without taking residence. As emotional states elevate, relationships often change. People respond differently to you because you are no longer broadcasting stress or resistance. Communication becomes clearer, boundaries stronger, and empathy deeper. You listen more fully because you are not emotionally defending yourself. You speak more honestly because you are not emotionally seeking approval. Elevated emotions also influence the future you are conditioning your body to accept. When you consistently feel states associated with growth and fulfillment, the body begins to expect experiences that match those emotions. You become more receptive to opportunities, more willing to act, and more trusting of intuition. Action taken from elevated emotion is different from action taken from fear. It is cleaner, more precise, and more aligned. It is not about maintaining a constant high. It is about recognizing that emotional states are choices that can be practiced, refined, and embodied. Each moment offers a new opportunity to tune your internal environment. The more often you choose coherence over chaos, the more your body learns a new way of being. Over time, this emotional training reshapes how you experience yourself in the world, and you begin to notice that life starts responding differently because it has changed, but because the signal you are sending has become clearer, steadier, and more elevated, allowing you to move through each day with a sense of inner stability and quiet confidence that does not depend on circumstances and continues to grow as you remain committed to feeling into the future before it arrives. Alignment is not something that happens by accident. It is something that emerges when awareness becomes integrated into daily life. Most people think, feel, and act from different places at the same time. Their thoughts may reach toward growth, while their emotions are anchored in fear and their actions are driven by habit. This internal fragmentation creates mixed signals. When the mind wants one thing, the body feels another, and behavior follows an old pattern. Progress feels inconsistent and exhausting. Thoughts are the language of the mind, they shape perception and provide direction. Emotions are the language of the body, they provide energy and motivation. Actions are the language of the physical world. Turn internal states into lived experience. When these three are misaligned, effort increases but results diminish. You may think positively but feel doubtful, or feel inspired but act inconsistently. Alignment begins when you recognize this disconnect without self-judgment. The mind often leads the process of change. You decide what you want, what you believe is possible, and who you want to become. But if the emotional body is not brought along, change remains theoretical. The body responds to emotion, not intention. If your thoughts are future focused, but your emotions are rooted in past experiences, the body will continue to act according to what it knows. This is why true alignment requires emotional participation, not just mental agreement. Emotions add meaning to thoughts. When a thought is paired with a strong emotional state, it becomes memorable and influential. This is how beliefs are formed. You repeatedly think about a new direction while feeling inspired, hopeful, or clear. The body begins to accept that direction as real. Over time, actions start to shift naturally because the internal resistance fades. Alignment does not force behavior, it invites it. Actions are where alignment becomes visible. They reflect what you truly believe and feel, not what you claim to want. You can say you value growth, but if your actions consistently avoid challenge, the body is still operating from protection. Thoughts and emotions align, action feels less like effort and more like expression. You do not need to push yourself constantly. Momentum carries you forward. Misalignment often shows up as inner conflict. You may feel torn between what feels comfortable and what feels meaningful. This tension is not a problem, it is information. It shows you where old emotional patterns are colliding with new intentions. Instead of resisting this tension, observing it brings clarity. You begin to see which thoughts are aspirational and which emotions are habitual. Awareness creates the opportunity to bring them into coherence. Coherence is a state where thoughts, feelings, and actions are synchronized. In this state, system functions more efficiently. Decisions feel clearer, reactions slow down, and energy becomes more stable. You are no longer constantly negotiating with yourself. This internal harmony creates a sense of integrity where what you think, feel, say, reflect the same direction. Building alignment requires repetition and patience. One aligned moment does not override years of conditioning. Each time you notice a gap between intention and behavior and choose to respond differently, you strengthen coherence. When you think about responding calmly and then actually pause and breathe instead of reacting, you reinforce trust between the mind and body. Over time, this trust becomes automatic. Alignment also deepens self-respect. When actions match values, confidence grows naturally. You no longer need external validation because your internal experience feels consistent. This confidence is quiet and grounded. It does not come from proving anything, from knowing that you are living in accordance with your own awareness. External life often mirrors internal alignment. When thoughts, feelings, and actions are coherent, opportunities tend to appear more naturally. You notice them more clearly and act on them more decisively. This is not coincidence, it is perception meeting readiness. When you are internally aligned, you are less distracted by doubt and more responsive to intuition. Often decreases as alignment increases. Much stress comes from resisting yourself, from forcing action without emotional agreement or suppressing emotion to maintain a certain image. Alignment removes this friction. Energy that was once spent managing internal conflict becomes available for creativity, learning, and connection. Relationships also benefit from alignment. Communication becomes clearer because you are not saying one thing while feeling another. Boundaries strengthen because you are acting in accordance with your values rather than reacting to emotional pressure. Others sense this coherence and often respond with greater respect or clarity. Alignment is not perfection. Be moments of inconsistency, fatigue, or emotional regression. What matters is not avoiding these moments, but recognizing them quickly and returning to awareness. Each return reinforces the pattern of coherence. Over time, space between intention and expression narrows. When thoughts are clear, emotions are elevated, and actions are consistent, life feels less fragmented. You experience yourself as a unified being rather than a collection of competing impulses. Unity creates a powerful signal. The body trusts the mind listens to the body, and behavior reflects both, allowing you to move through daily experiences with a sense of direction that feels embodied rather than imagined. Responding to challenges with presence instead of habit, making choices that feel honest rather than forced, and gradually noticing that what once required constant effort now unfolds with a sense of internal order that continues to organize how you show up, how you decide, and how you participate in the unfolding moments of your life. As alignment becomes less something you try to achieve and more something you continuously practice without needing to label it or explain it. People move through life reacting rather than choosing. A situation arises, a comment is made, an unexpected event occurs, and before awareness has time to intervene, the body responds. Words come out automatically, emotions surge, and actions follow familiar pathways. Reaction feels immediate and justified because it is rooted in memory. It is the past expressing itself through the present moment. Living this way gives the illusion of engagement, but it quietly leaves energy and reinforces patterns that no longer serve growth. Reaction is fast because it bypasses consciousness. It is driven by stored emotional experiences and conditioned beliefs. When something in the present resembles something unresolved from the past, the nervous system responds as if history is repeating itself. The body does not ask whether the response is appropriate. It simply executes what it has learned. Why people often regret what they say or do after reacting. Awareness arrives too late once the pattern has already played out. Intention, on the other hand, requires presence. It asks you to slow down just to notice what is happening internally before acting externally. That pause, even if it lasts only a few seconds, creates choice. In that space, you are no longer controlled by habit. You become the observer of your own internal state. You feel the emotional surge without immediately expressing it. You recognize the thought without automatically believing it. Choosing intention over reaction is not about suppression. It is about regulation. Suppression pushes emotion down, storing it for later expression. Regulation allows emotion to move through awareness without dictating behavior. When you pause and breathe, the nervous system receives a signal of safety. The body learns that it does not need to defend itself immediately. This is how emotional intelligence is built moment by moment. The modern world is designed to provoke reaction. Constant information, opinions, notifications, comparisons keep attention externally focused. When attention lives outside, intention weakens. You begin responding to what is loudest rather than what is meaningful. Reclaiming intention means reclaiming attention. It means deciding where your energy goes instead of allowing it to be pulled. Living from intention requires clarity. You cannot choose intentionally if you do not know what you stand for. Values provide direction when emotions are strong. When you are clear about how you want to show up, decisions become easier. Instead of asking how you feel in the moment, you ask whether a response aligns with who you are becoming. This shifts behavior from impulse to purpose. You may resist this shift at first. Reaction is familiar. It has provided protection in the past. Intention feels slower, unfamiliar, and sometimes uncomfortable. When you do not react, the body may interpret stillness as vulnerability. This is where practice matters. Each time you choose intention and nothing negative happens, the nervous system updates its understanding of safety. Over time, intentional living rewires emotional responses. Triggers lose their intensity because the body no longer associates them with immediate action. You still feel emotions, but they no longer control you. You experience them as information rather than commands. Creates a sense of internal stability that is not dependent on circumstances. Intentional living also changes how you experience time. Reaction keeps you trapped in urgency. Everything feels immediate and overwhelming. Intention introduces spaciousness. You stop rushing conclusions. You allow events to unfold before deciding how to engage. This spaciousness reduces stress and increases clarity. You begin to respond with precision instead of force. Relationships shift when intention replaces reaction. Conversations become more conscious. You listen instead of preparing defenses. You speak with clarity instead of emotion-driven urgency. Misunderstandings decrease because you are no longer projecting past experiences onto present interactions. Boundaries become easier to maintain because they are chosen, not enforced emotionally. Intention also strengthens self-trust. Each time you pause and choose your response, you prove to yourself that you are capable of directing your life. Confidence that does not rely on external approval. You begin to trust your ability to navigate challenges without losing yourself in them. Living intentionally does not mean life becomes predictable or easy. Challenges still arise. Uncertainty still exists. What changes is your relationship to these experiences. Instead of feeling pushed around by events, you feel engaged with them. You become an active participant rather than a reactive observer. Intentional moments accumulate. One pause leads to another. One conscious response leads to greater awareness the next time. Over time, intention becomes a habit. You begin to notice reactions forming before they take over. You catch yourself sooner. You recover faster. The gap between stimulus and response continues to widen. This way of living conserves energy. Reaction burns energy quickly and leaves emotional residue. Intention uses energy efficiently and restores balance. You stop carrying the emotional weight of unnecessary conflicts. Mental clarity increases because you are no longer replaying reactive moments in your mind. As intention becomes your default, your internal environment stabilizes. You are less affected by external chaos because your state is not determined by what happens around you. You develop the ability to remain centered in uncertain situations. This does not make you passive, it makes you grounded. From intention is a daily discipline, not a single decision. It is practiced in small moments that often go unnoticed. Each choice to pause, observe, and respond consciously strengthens your ability to remain present. Over time, presence becomes your identity. You begin to move through life with a sense of authorship, aware that while you cannot control every event, you can always choose the quality of consciousness you bring to it. And that choice continues shaping how you think, how you feel, how you act as you navigate each unfolding moment with greater awareness, steadiness, and personal responsibility rooted in the simple but powerful decision to respond from intention rather than habit. Future is often imagined as something distant, something that arrives on its own timeline, independent of who you are right now. This way of thinking places you in a position of waiting, as if life will eventually catch up to your hopes. Future is not a place you go, it is a state you grow into. The experiences that unfold ahead of you are shaped by the version of yourself that is consistently showing up in the present moment, whether consciously or unconsciously. People try to create a new future while remaining emotionally and mentally anchored in the present identity. They want different outcomes, but continue to think, feel, and behave in familiar ways. Creates frustration because the internal signal has not changed. The future responds not to desire, but to embodiment. When you begin to live as if the future you want already makes sense internally, life begins to reorganize around that state. Becoming a future now is not about pretending or escaping reality. It is about alignment between intention and identity. You begin to ask yourself deeper questions. How would the version of you who belongs in that future think each day? How would they respond to stress? How would they speak to themselves when things do not go as planned? These questions shift your focus from waiting to becoming. Identity is shaped through repetition. Every choice you make reinforces who you believe you are. When you consistently act from the same emotional patterns, you strengthen the same identity. When you begin choosing differently, even in small ways, you signal the brain and body that a new self is emerging. At first, may feel uncomfortable because it challenges familiarity. The body prefers what it knows. The mind prefers what it can predict. Growth asks both to tolerate the unknown. The present moment is where the future is rehearsed. Each thought is a rehearsal. Emotional is a rehearsal. Each action is a rehearsal. When you rehearse doubt, urgency, or self-criticism, you prepare for a future that reflects those states. When you rehearse clarity, trust, and purpose, you prepare for a future that matches them. The body does not know the difference between what is imagined and what is experienced. It only knows what it is repeatedly shown. Now means embodying the emotional states that belong to the life you want before there is evidence. This is where most people hesitate. They want proof first. They want reassurance. Yet waiting for proof keeps the old identity intact. The moment you choose to feel gratitude before circumstances change or confidence before results appear, you are stepping into a new role. You are no longer reacting to life. You are shaping how life responds. This shift requires trust, not blind faith, but trust brews self-awareness. You begin to notice that when you change your internal state, your perception changes. Opportunities feel more visible. Decisions feel clearer. You become more willing to act because fear no longer dominates your inner dialogue. This creates momentum. Action taken from a future-oriented identity feels purposeful rather than forced. The environment may test this change. People may respond to you based on who you used to be. Situations may arise that tempt you back in old reactions. Moments are not setbacks. They are invitations to choose again. Each time you respond from the future version of yourself rather than the past one, you strengthen that identity. Consistency matters more than perfection. Time begins to feel different when you live this way. You are no longer racing toward a future or dragging the past behind you. The present moment becomes meaningful because it is where becoming happens. You understand that who you are being today is more important than what you are trying to achieve tomorrow. Achievement becomes a byproduct rather than the source of fulfillment. Living as the future now also changes how you relate to uncertainty. Instead of seeing uncertainty as a threat, you begin to see it as space. Space for new possibilities that could not emerge from the old identity. You stop needing to control every outcome because you trust the internal direction you are cultivating. Trust brings calm, even when circumstances are unpredictable. As this way of being stabilizes, effort decreases. You no longer need to constantly motivate yourself because your actions align with who you are becoming. Discipline turns into devotion. Habits change because they no longer match your identity. Old behaviors fall away not through force, but through irrelevance. The future begins to feel familiar because you have been practicing it internally. When opportunities arise, you recognize them. When challenges appear, you meet them with the mindset you have been rehearsing. Life feels less like something that happens to you and more like something you are participating in consciously. Becoming the future now is a commitment to internal honesty. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions drift back into old patterns and you gently redirect, this redirection is not harsh, it is intentional. Over time, the gap between who you are now and who you are becoming narrows. Eventually, waiting for the future dissolves. You realize that the future has been responding all along to the consciousness you are cultivating. Each present moment becomes an opportunity to embody clarity, purpose, and presence. The more consistently you live from that state, the more natural it feels, until the distinction between who you are now and who you once imagined becoming begins to blur, and you find yourself living in a way that feels aligned with what once felt distant, recognizing that the future you were preparing for has already begun unfolding through the choices you are making, the energy you are holding, awareness you are bringing into each moment as you continue to step forward without needing a finish line to validate the direction you are moving in. As we step into 2026, the path forward is not about waiting for life to hand us change. It is about becoming the change from within. Every thought you choose, every emotion you cultivate, every action you take, and every moment of awareness you embrace is shaping the reality that will unfold around you. The future is not separate from you, reflection of the consciousness you carry into each present moment. When you break free from old patterns, align your mind, body, and heart, and live intentionally from elevated emotional states, you do not merely adapt to life, you begin to co-create it. Is the power of conscious preparation, the understanding that who you are becoming now will determine the experiences that arrive, and that every step taken with awareness, clarity, and purpose brings you closer to a reality that feels alive, expansive, truly your own. In this way, 26 is not just another year, it is the space where the new version of you begins to emerge, moment by moment, thought by thought, and choice by choice.